Hello and good day. For today, our topic is advantages and disadvantages of credit. Without further ado, let's start. Credit is not just a two-way transaction between two parties. It could start another credit transaction involving other parties. So, isa na tong advantage ng credit. Yung credit transaction ng dalawang parties, it could result to another credit transaction involving other parties. Let us illustrate. Recall the production marketing distribution system. The production marketing distribution system is composed of four, and they are the manufacturer, the wholesaler, the retailer, and the consumer. Of course, yung manufacturer, uutang yan sa banks or other financial institutions. Let's say a bank grants credit to the manufacturer. So, isang credit transaction na yan. Credit transaction between the bank and the manufacturer. This credit transaction between the bank and the manufacturer could start another credit transaction. Since the bank grants credit to the manufacturer could grant another credit to the wholesaler. The credit transaction between the manufacturer and the wholesaler could start another transaction. This time, the wholesaler could grant credit to the retailer. Continuing the process, the credit transaction between the wholesaler and the retailer could start again another credit transaction. This time, the retailer could grant credit to the consumer. Yan yung ibig sabihin ng credit is not just a two-way transaction between two parties. It could start another credit transaction involving other parties. In effect, the introduction of large amounts of credit could recharge a stagnant economy. The volume of transactions from the chain would be so large that many types of economic activities would result. Yung tinutukoy na chain dito, yan yung chain from the manufacturer to consumers. From manufacturer to wholesaler, to retailer, to consumer. Since the credit transaction between two parties could result to another credit transaction involving other parties, the result is there will be a large volume of transactions. And if there is a large volume of transactions, the result is there will be many types of economic activities. The large volume of transactions results to many types of economic activities. At ano-ano yung mga economic activities na yan? First, more employment opportunities for sales clerks to handle the extra sales volume bookkeepers to record them, and even employment in the government sector to track down sales for tax purposes. In other words, there are more job opportunities for workers. More employment opportunities for sales clerks to handle the extra sales volume. Yung tinutukoy na volume dito, yan yung quantity. Kung gaano kadami yung units na ibebenta. Of course, kung mas marami yung ibebenta, there will be more employment opportunities for sales clerks. Another, more employment opportunities for bookkeepers to record them. Ang trabaho kasi ng bookkeeper ay mag-record ng business transactions. Of course, kasama sa nire-record nila yung credit transactions, sales transactions, and other business transactions. Moreover, there will be more employment opportunities in the government sector to track down sales for tax purposes. Next, suppliers of raw materials would also experience a sharp growth in orders, again possibly opening up new employment. Of course, kung ang manufacturer ay naka-obtain ng credit from the banks or financial institutions, makakabili siya ng mas maraming raw materials from the suppliers. As a result, the suppliers of raw materials would have a sharp growth in their orders. And if there is a sharp growth in orders, the suppliers of raw materials could open new employment for workers. Next, generated profits could translate to higher taxes for public works development, bigger investment on plant, equipment, and research. Ang income tax kasi nakabase yan sa taxable income. The higher the taxable income, the higher taxes to be paid. The taxes paid by the taxpayers to the government will be used for public projects and development. In general, credit is a major stimulator to a nation's economic development. But specifically, how would credit help the manufacturer, the wholesaler, the retailer, and the consumer? Let's start with the manufacturer. If a manufacturer can obtain credit, the manufacturer could replace its obsolete equipment and reduce production cost per unit, resulting in lower selling prices. Ang purpose kasi ng pag-replace ng obsolete equipment or old equipment is to minimize waste and defective units. Kasi kung mas bago yung equipment, mas maganda ang kanyang performance. So in effect, mas mami-minimize yung waste at defective units. Of course, kung mas mababa yung cost per unit, mababa din yung selling price per unit. Usually kasi, ang selling price per unit, nakabase yan dun sa cost per unit. But take note, the selling price per unit must be higher than the cost per unit. The lower prices will certainly give it an advantage vis-a-vis its competitors, resulting in higher sales and higher profit margins. Of course, needless to say, kapag mababa yung prices, mataas ang sales at profit margins. Yung profit margin, ang ibig sabihin niyan, profit ratio. Paano yan kinocompute? Net income divided by sales. Also, with lower prices, consumers will be directly benefited. Paano nabe-benefit ang consumers? Of course, in the form of savings. Next, wholesaler and retailer. With available credit, they could purchase in bulk to get volume discounts or pay on time and quality for prompt payment discounts. If the wholesaler and retailer purchase in bulk, ang tawag dun sa discount na makukuha nila ay volume discount. Kapag nagbayad naman ng maaga, yung wholesaler at retailer, ang tawag dun sa discount nila ay purchase discount. Again, by lowering cost, they can increase sales by reducing their prices. Or with credit, they could allocate funds to improve their distribution systems or improve their display counters or increase their advertising budgets, all of which will contribute significantly to bigger sales and profits. Next, consumer. The consumers are able to enjoy a better quality of life without having to accumulate funds. They can immediately purchase the items that would improve their living conditions, their health, or education. That is actually the purpose of credit for the consumers. Makakabili sila ng items kahit hindi pa available ang kanilang funds. While credit is reflected in the company's books as a liability, credit is really a resource that could effectively provide its users advantages over its competitors in many different ways. Of course, sa part nung nag-obtain ng credit, yung credit ay liability. Sa part naman nung nag-grant ng credit, the credit is an asset. Although sa part nung nag-obtain ng credit, yung credit ay liability, credit still provides its users advantages over its competitors. First, bigger, more complete inventory, offering customers more product choices, an array of different colors, package sizes that can result in higher sales levels. Of course, yan yung hinahanap ng consumers at customers, more product choices. Mas maraming pagpipilian, mas maganda. Kasi kapag isa lang yung pagpipilian, possibly, hindi yan yung hinahanap ng customers at customers that can satisfy their needs and wants. Kapag mas maraming choices, mas marami silang pagpipilian. At kapag mas maraming choices, possibly, they can look something among the choices, or they can find something among the choices that can suit their needs and wants. Next, lower costs of production with better equipment obtained through credit. Of course, yung funds na ma-obtain nila through the use of credit, pambibili nila yan sa better equipment. They will use the funds obtained through credit to purchase a better equipment. Yung mga outdated na equipment, yung mga old na equipment, dapat palitan na. Dapat palitan na yan ng better and new equipment. Because such better and new equipment will provide a better performance. And as a result, this will lower the costs of production of the business. Next, better marketing practices that will increase the company's overall market share. Meaning to say, yung funds na ma-obtain nila through the use of credit, yung funds na makukuha nila through credit, yan yung i-allocate nila for promotions, advertisements, and better quality of product. The availability of credit has its disadvantages too. There are two sides to a coin. Of course, kung merong advantages, meron ding disadvantages. But take note, kahit na merong advantages at disadvantages ang credit, mas matimbang pa rin yung advantages kaysa sa disadvantages. Some of the perceived disadvantages are, first, the availability of credit affects or distorts the way of thinking of some managers. Sometimes, some managers tend to relax and forget that credit is not free. Of course, credit is not free because they need to pay that credit when it is due or when the due date comes. Of course, kasama na dyan yung interest and other charges. Managers should plan and manage their credit. Take note that on their part, credit is liability. Kailangan talaga nilang pagplanuhan yan at i-manage. Because kung hindi nila yan pagpaplanuhan or i-manage ng mabuti, this will increase their liability. Next, very aggressive users of credit tend to ignore risk. Of course, yung risk dyan ay yung risk na hindi sila makabayad. On the part naman sa party na nag-grant ng credit, yung risk dyan ay yung risk na hindi makolekt yung credit. Kapag sinabing very aggressive users of credit, ito yung mga users na kung saan in most instances gumagamit sila ng credit. Obtain sila ng credit without taking account of the impact that credit can impose on their overall performance. Of course, yung credit, yan ay liability. It will affect the financial condition of the business. Next, credit increases the cost of doing business. A very good example of a cost of doing business is interest. With the use of credit, you are obliged to pay interest. Kung mas marami kang credit, of course, mas mataas din ang interest. That's why credit increases the cost of doing business. That's why businesses should properly plan and manage their credit. Because if the credit is not properly planned and managed, this will affect the overall financial position and financial performance of the business. And that concludes the discussion in advantages and disadvantages of credit.